For decades, one argument kept the Shroud of Turin's authenticity alive. Scientists supposedly carbon-dated the wrong fabric. Now researchers have examined material from that exact sample, and the defense may have collapsed. The new work did not carbon-date the shroud again. It asked a narrower question with enormous consequences. Was the sample tested in 1988 really an invisible repair, different from the rest of the cloth? The fibers themselves now give an answer. The fragments were consistent in flax, twist, weave, and density. No cotton or repair was observed, and no significant contamination capable of explaining the medieval date was found. The shroud is a long linen cloth bearing the faint front and back image of a wounded man. For many believers, it is the burial cloth placed around Jesus after the crucifixion. That possibility gives every stain, thread, and measurement a weight far beyond ordinary textile history. Yet devotion and documentation are not the same thing. The first secure historical display of the cloth appears around 1355 in Liry, France. Earlier connections have been proposed, but none provides an unbroken, broadly accepted chain to the 1st century. The documented story begins in medieval Europe, where the image drew pilgrims and controversy almost immediately. That gap does not tell us how the image formed. It does make the cloth's physical age decisive. If the linen is ancient, the historical question stays open. If it is medieval, its claimed connection to the burial of Jesus becomes extraordinarily difficult. That is why one small piece removed from one corner in 1988 came to carry the argument for the entire shroud. In 1988, a strip was cut from a corner of the shroud under an agreed sampling plan. The material was divided among 3 radiocarbon laboratories: the University of Arizona, Oxford, and Zurich. Each laboratory prepared and measured its portion independently, with control samples included in the process. The results were published in Nature in 1989. The calibrated range was 1260 to 1390 CE. The 3 measurements were not identical, but all converged on the Middle Ages. That range is close to the shroud's first secure appearance in the historical record. As direct evidence for the age of the tested linen, the result was powerful. But the procedure contained an obvious vulnerability. All 3 laboratories received material from the same general corner. If that corner was unusual, repaired, or contaminated in a way that shifted the measurements, 3 laboratories could precisely date the same unrepresentative material. Agreement between laboratories would confirm the date of the sample, not automatically the date of every thread in the cloth. That distinction became the opening through which the strongest defense survived. The carbon measurements might be technically sound, critics argued, while the identity of the material itself was wrong. The objection was not simply that scientists made a careless mistake. It developed into a specific account of the sampled corner. During its long history, the shroud had been handled, displayed, damaged, and repaired. An intervention known as invisible mending could, in principle, blend newer fibers into older fabric so a repaired zone looked continuous. Some researchers reported signs they interpreted as cotton mixed with linen near the sample area. Others proposed dyes, coatings, or foreign fibers introduced during a repair. If newer cotton or linen had been woven into the corner, the resulting radiocarbon age could move toward the medieval period. The sampled corner was also near an edge that had experienced handling, creating a separate contamination concern. Oils, smoke, microbes, or conservation materials might have added younger carbon. There was a broader statistical complaint as well. One corner cannot demonstrate that a large, potentially non-uniform cloth has the same composition everywhere. Even if the laboratories dated their portions correctly, critics said the sampling design had not tested the central image-bearing textile. These claims varied in strength, and contamination large enough to shift a 1st-century cloth into the Middle Ages would need to be substantial. Still, the combined argument was reasonable enough to demand a direct test. Was the Arizona material a mixed repair? Did it contain cotton? Did its weave differ from the shroud? Was it burdened with contamination that normal preparation had missed? For decades, the exact archived material needed to examine those questions seemed unavailable. Two tiny fragments from the University of Arizona allocation did remain. They were labeled A1A and A1B, material associated with the same 1988 sample that produced Arizona's radiocarbon measurement. Rachel Freer-Waters and Timothy Joel examined those archived fragments in work published on April 18, 2026. This was textile analysis, not a new carbon date. The researchers did not produce a second age for the shroud. They asked whether the structure and condition of the retained material supported the claim that the laboratories had received an anomalous repair or contaminant-heavy outlier. Digital microscopy documented the threads and weave of both fragments. Polarized light microscopy examined fibers from both. Scanning electron microscopy, spoken as SEM, inspected only a small portion of A1A at higher magnification. A1B was not sampled for SEM. These methods could not date the fibers. They tested what the fragments were made of, how they were woven, and whether the examined material showed repair or significant contamination. Both examined fragments were flax. Their morphology was consistent with flax rather than cotton. No cotton fibers were observed in A1A or A1B. Cotton had been offered as evidence that the sampled corner contained a foreign mixture in these pieces. That mixture was not present. The yarn also twisted in the direction reported for the main shroud cloth, a Z-twist. Twist direction is a manufacturing choice. It does not prove two pieces came from one bolt, but a conflicting twist would have strengthened the case that the sample was foreign. The expected Z-twist removed that mismatch. Both fragments showed a 3/1 or 3:1 twill structure. The herringbone reversal was specifically observed in a 1A. These structural features are documented in the shroud. Thread density also fell within the published range for the main textile. Fiber, twist, weave, reversal, and density pointed in the same direction. The archived Arizona material was consistent with descriptions of the principal linen. The researchers reported no signs of splicing, reweaving, or an inserted patch in the examined fragments. They did not see the mixed construction the invisible mending hypothesis required there. At higher magnification, the small portion of A1A sampled for SEM showed no significant surface contamination that would interfere with carbon dating. A1B was not tested by SEM, so that specific observation does not apply to it. The broader discussion concluded that the examined fragments showed no significant contaminants or signs of repair. None of these observations is a fresh measurement of age. Together, they test the proposed reason for rejecting the old measurement. If the dated corner had been a newer repair, the retained fragments should have offered some physical sign of foreign fibers, altered construction, or anomalous structure. Instead, the tested textile features were consistent with the documented cloth, while cotton and repair signatures were absent. The conclusion remains limited to a small, potentially non-uniform subset of the original sample. A 1A and a 1B are small fragments. The study's authors state that limitation plainly. Tiny retained pieces cannot represent every thread in the original strip, much less every region of the full shroud. A non-uniform textile could contain a local feature that these fragments did not capture. No responsible reading of the paper can turn two fragments into evidence of uniformity across the full cloth. That caveat leaves a logical possibility. A repair might have existed elsewhere in the sampled strip, outside the surviving pieces, but a possibility is not positive evidence. The fragments came from the Arizona allocation at the center of the objection, and the observed features are consistent with the main cloth descriptions across several independent textile criteria. The small sample therefore limits the scope of the conclusion without erasing it. The study cannot rule out repair anywhere on the shroud. It can say that the archived fragments examined do not look like the foreign, cotton-bearing, heavily contaminated patch proposed to explain away the 1988 date. Three questions are often combined, but they require different evidence. The first is age. When was the tested linen made? The second is sample identity. Was the 1988 corner an anomalous repair rather than representative shroud material? The third is image formation. How did the body image appear on the cloth? The 1988 radiocarbon measurements addressed the first question and placed the tested material in 1260 to 1390 CE. The 2026 microscopy study addressed the second. It found the examined Arizona fragments consistent with the main cloth descriptions and found no signs of repair or significant date-altering contamination in those fragments. It did not perform another radiocarbon measurement, and it did not directly test the mechanism that formed the image. That separation matters. An unusual image cannot make linen older. A medieval date cannot by itself explain every visual or chemical property of the image. And the absence of repair in two small fragments cannot prove uniformity across the whole artifact. Each claim must stay attached to its supporting evidence. What has weakened sharply is the specific escape route that said the laboratories dated a foreign patch. The strongest direct dating evidence still favors a medieval origin for the tested textile, and the new analysis makes that evidence harder to dismiss as a sampling accident. What remains open is how the image was produced, why it has its unusual appearance, and what historical process created the object that emerged securely in 14th century France. The result is narrower than a verdict on faith, yet stronger than another round of speculation. It replaces an assumed patch with inspected fibers and a testable record. The shroud may still hold a mystery. Its body image remains unusual, emotionally powerful, and disputed. But those are different questions from the identity of the cloth tested in 1988. The new analysis does not settle every argument about the shroud. It does make one escape route much harder to use. After this test, its strongest mystery is no longer whether scientists dated the wrong cloth,